In 1981, the United States was in the midst of an economic crisis. Every month, 10% of the population faced unemployment. The number of homeless people in cities was on the rise, with long queues forming early each day for a bed at the local shelter. On television, the president reported on the dire economic situation. Sitting across from the TV was a man with a worried expression on his face, fiddling with a Rubik's Cube. His name was Chris, a medical equipment salesman. He had invested his entire savings in purchasing a batch of medical equipment, believing it would be his big break. However, the devices were difficult to sell. Despite being more precise than standard equipment, they were twice as expensive. Unable to sell the devices, they sat in storage at his home to make ends meet. Chris's wife worked 2 jobs. They were already 2 months behind on rent. Overwhelmed by the pressure, his wife grew disappointed in Chris. To make matters worse, Chris's car was towed away due to unpaid parking tickets. He had hit rock bottom. One day, Chris encountered a man driving a luxury car. He asked the man 2 questions: what he did for a living and how he could become wealthy like him. The man smiled and replied that he was a stockbroker. Chris believed a college degree was necessary for such a job, but the man confidently stated that it wasn't required. All one needed was a strong grasp of mathematics and social skills. After the man left, Chris looked around at the people surrounding him. They all seemed happy and content. This experience planted the seed of happiness in Chris's heart. Soon after, an opportunity for a stockbroker interview arose. Chris obtained an application form, filled it out, and submitted it to the company's HR manager. The manager glanced at the form and informed Chris that he would be notified if an interview was scheduled. A month passed without any notification, but Chris refused to give up. He waited outside the company every day for the manager. Finally, his persistence paid off, but the manager was in a hurry to get somewhere. Chris lied, claiming he was headed to the same place, seizing the chance to communicate with the manager. In the car, Chris began discussing his abilities, but the manager wasn't paying close attention. Instead, he was focused on solving the popular Rubik's Cube. The manager remarked that no one could solve it, but Chris confidently stated that he could. He took the cube and began explaining the solving method. The manager was skeptical, but Chris firmly believed in his ability. He quickly solved one side, and the manager started to take notice of the determined man before him. Slowly, the second layer was completed, leaving the manager in disbelief. With only the 6th side remaining, Chris swiftly and deftly manipulated the Rubik's Cube, his fingers moving like a pianist playing a melody. With a final twist, the Rubik's Cube was solved. Chris handed it back to the manager, who stared at the completed puzzle, amazed that Chris had actually done it. A sense of respect for Chris grew within him. Just then, the manager arrived at his destination. He complimented Chris on his impressive solving skills and exited the vehicle. As he left, Chris glanced at the taximeter and then at his empty wallet, realizing he didn't even have enough for the fare. After a moment of contemplation, Chris grabbed his bag and bolted from the taxi as it came to a stop. The driver immediately gave chase, with Chris apologizing profusely as he ran. He made his way to a subway station, the driver hot on his heels. Chris boarded the train, but his actions came at a greater cost. He had lost one of his devices, equivalent to a month's living expenses. Chris called his wife to explain the situation and why he couldn't pick up their son. His wife, utterly disappointed, decided to leave him, taking their son with her. By the time Chris reached home, the apartment was empty. Suddenly, the phone rang. It was the manager, inviting him for an interview and providing a number to remember. However, there wasn't a single pen in the house. Chris had no choice but to memorize the number and rush to a store to write it down. The next day,